Hey watercolor wizards, Hajra here. Some of you might know that I've been crushing on miniature painting for a while. So this video is all sorts of awesome because it is my first ever YouTube collaboration video with the lovely and talented Annika Landberg, and also my first ever miniature painting in the form of art cards. Annika and I had a shared theme for our card, and it was Spring Nymph. My initial idea was to draw a close-up profile to get the face larger in the small canvas space of the card, and I put a rose in her hand and hair and ear to symbolize nature and spring. I'm more comfortable with this sort of realism style, so it's where I started, but then I felt I wanted something looser, but I didn't know where to start because I don't do that sort of thing much. Eventually, I came up with this second, simpler illustration after watching an old Soviet cartoon, of all things, on YouTube about flower maidens one night, and it inspired me to do my own waif, slender as a green shoot and delicate as a flower petal. As you can see, I did the background in a wet into wet, soft textured wash first, in green and a hint of teal here and there. I used watercolor crayons for this piece, which used as a paint behave like an opaque gouache or semi-opaque watercolor, depending on if the paint is thick or thinner. So I used the loose greens to get a verdant foil for my spring nymph. Now we're venturing into summer, but I think a spring nymph can totally work over time as a summer nymph too, with all the flowers still in bloom. After the green dried, I drew in some simple blooms and leaves and stems wet on dry to make a sort of lacework of this greenery behind the nymph and add detail and more texture to the background. I returned to the flowers and leaves and smudged some parts of them away into the background with a damp brush. The lost and found edges create a more interesting background than if I had left all the lines there. Adding this bit of mystery, even to such a simple piece with simple lines, really helps the art. Whether it's loose or realistic art, suggestion rather than overt statement is really useful. This is just my first art card, but if you want to see a real veteran at work, check out Annika's channel. She has done every subject imaginable as ACEOs, and she does some lovely effects with color and light and texture. It adds so much interest and depth to her cards. The chance to work together with her on a shared art video theme was a real thrill, and I want to take the time to thank Annika for doing this awesome collab with me, and for being my introduction to the art form of cards like ACEOs and ATCs, which I didn't know about before. So artist trading cards, ATCs, are miniature artworks that started in 1997 and are now hugely popular the world over. You can use any art media or techniques on them as long as the card fits into a standard trading card sleeve, with the official size being 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. ATCs are traded for other cards, not sold. Cards that are sold are called ACEOs, which stands for Art Card Editions and Originals. I used to collect comic book cards when I was younger, and I traded and also bought and sold them, and they all went by one name. So the two different names are a bit confusing to me. I don't know why they can't both be called ATCs or artist trading cards, but there you are. You can buy blank ATCs in different papers and finishes from Strathmore or Crescent, but for this, my first card, I just cut a 2.5 by 3.5 inch piece of Arches hot press paper using my paper trimmer to get really straight edges. So getting to the colors that I'm using for the nymph, I put down some light local glazes of pink and fuchsia and decided to make the central channel of her skirt green to imply a stem under the surrounded pink and lavender petal fabric. The veil was also petal-like, and her jewelry and ornaments I imagined would be like little gold contrast areas on a plant or like dewdrops. The whole point was to make her as flower-like as possible. I considered making her skin green or lavender or pink, but I felt it would diminish the contrast of those colors elsewhere and just blend in with them too much, so I gave her a nice earthy complexion like she was just formed from rich soil. I painted the tiny face and arms with minimal highlights and then added pink and lavender to her eyelids and lips. When painting the costume, I tried to keep in mind that watercolor can get muddy in a tiny space, so I tried to paint the skirt in golden hems simply, to imitate the satiny folds and border of a lehenga type skirt. Yep, my parents are from Pakistan, remember? For the blouse, I used an ombre gradient with the edges of the sleeves and hem being darker, and for both the blouse and the skirt, I still tried to make it look like they were made out of flower petal fabric. Because there's a whole legion of dewdrops, I only filmed 2 of them since they are all done the exact same way and it would be boring to watch them all. They are all done in basically 5 steps. 1. You put in a yellowish white C shape at the base of the drop. 2. Come back with dark purple for the rest of the drop. 3. Blend the touching edge between the purple and yellow so there's a little bronze colored gradient in the middle. 4. Use a spotter brush to apply white highlights, one in the purple area and one in the yellow area. And 5. Add a shadow outside the drop under the lighter yellow edge if it's sitting on a petal-like surface. So here's my finished spring nymph card with the small purple petals by her hips done like the larger pink parts of the skirt petals and the rest of the dewdrops done just like I did the first 2. I also tweaked the colors on her veil so they were a bit darker after the dewdrops went in and dotted in some white by the hem of her skirt to add some sparkle near the bottom of the card. What's most fun about making and looking at an art card is noticing more nuances when you see it up close, which is why I planned for the dewdrops and other embellishments to add some details. I enjoyed this loose illustration of a spring nymph and also my foray into art cards so much that I'll probably go and finish my other sketch in a future video and do more ACEOs in the future. It's such a yummy size to paint and collect, I can totally see why these are addictive. Thanks for parking your brushes here. Please comment and subscribe, and be sure to check out Annika's ACEO Spring Nymph for her half of our collab. I am so curious to see what she did. The link to her video will show up on screen as well as in the description below. Until next time, wishing you all miniature art adventures.